Peter William Sutcliffe, also known as Peter William Coonan, was an English serial killer who was dubbed the Yorkshire Ripper, an allusion to Jack the Ripper, by the press. On the 22nd of May 1981, he was found guilty of murdering 13 women and attempting to murder 7 others between 1975 and 1980. Peter Sutcliffe was born on June 2, 1946, to a working-class family in Bingley, West Riding of Yorkshire, and was raised Catholic. His parents were John William Sutcliffe and his wife Kathleen Frances née Coonan. Reportedly a loner, Sutcliffe left school aged 15 and had a series of menial jobs, including 2 stints as a gravedigger in the 1960s. Sutcliffe, by some reports, hired prostitutes as a young man, and it has been speculated that he had a bad experience during which he was conned out of money by a prostitute and her pimp. He developed an obsession with them, including watching them soliciting on the streets of Leeds and Bradford. Sutcliffe met Sonia Surma on the 14th of February 1967. They married on the 10th of August 1974. Sonia suffered several miscarriages, and they were informed that she would not be able to have children. She resumed a teacher training course, during which time she had an affair with an ice cream van driver. Through his childhood and his early adolescence, Sutcliffe showed no signs of abnormality, but one of his brothers admitted that their father was an abusive alcoholic, stating that their father once smashed a beer glass over Peter's head, for sitting in his chair at the Christmas table after arguing, when the brother was 4 or 5 years old. Their father used to whip them with a belt. Later, in part related to his occupation as a gravedigger, he developed a macabre sense of humor. In his late adolescence, Sutcliffe developed a growing obsession with voyeurism, and spent much time spying on prostitutes and the men seeking their services. Sutcliffe's first documented assault was of a female prostitute, whom he had met while searching for another woman who had tricked him out of money. He left his friend Trevor Birdsall's minivan and walked up St. Paul's Road in Bradford until he was out of sight. When Sutcliffe returned, he was out of breath, as if he had been running. He told Birdsall to drive off quickly. Sutcliffe said he had followed a prostitute into a garage and hit her over the head with a stone in a sock. According to his statement, Sutcliffe said, "I got out of the car, went across the road and hit her. The force of the impact tore the toe off the sock and whatever was in it came out. I went back to the car and got in it." Police visited Sutcliffe's home the next day, as the woman he had attacked had noted Birdsall's vehicle registration plate. He admitted he had hit her, but claimed it was with his hand. The police told him he was very lucky, as the woman did not want anything more to do with the incident. She was a known prostitute, and her husband was serving a jail term for assault. Sutcliffe committed his second assault on the night of the 5th of July 1975 in Keighley. He attacked Anna Rogulskij, who was walking alone, striking her unconscious with a ball-peen hammer and slashing her stomach with a knife. Disturbed by a neighbor, he left without killing her. Rogulskij survived after neurological surgery, but she was psychologically traumatized by the attack. She said later, "I've been afraid to go out much because I feel people are staring and pointing at me. The whole thing is making my life a misery. I sometimes wish I had died in the attack." On the night of the 15th of August, Sutcliffe attacked Olive Smelt in Halifax. Employing the same modus operandi, he briefly engaged Smelt with a commonplace pleasantry about the weather before striking hammer blows to her skull from behind. He then disarranged her clothing and slashed her lower back with a knife. Again he was interrupted and left his victim badly injured but alive. Like Rogulskij, Smelt subsequently suffered severe emotional and mental trauma. She had told interviewing officer Sup Dick Holland that her attacker had a Yorkshire accent, but this information was ignored, as was the fact that neither she nor Rogulskij were in towns with a red light area. On the 27th of August, Sutcliffe attacked 14-year-old Tracy Brown in Silsden. He struck her from behind and hit her on the head 5 times while she was walking along a country lane. He ran off when he saw the lights of a passing car, leaving his victim requiring brain surgery. Sutcliffe was not convicted of the attack but confessed to it in 1992. The first victim to be killed by Sutcliffe was Wilma McCann on the 30th of October. McCann, from Scott Hall in Leeds, was a mother of 4 children between the ages of 2 and 7. Sutcliffe struck the back of her skull twice with a hammer, then inflicted a stab wound to the throat, 2 stab wounds below the right breast, 3 stab wounds below the left breast, and a series of 9 stab wounds around the umbilicus. An extensive inquiry, involving 150 officers of the West Yorkshire Police and 11,000 interviews, failed to find the culprit. In December 2007, Wilma's eldest daughter Sonia Newlands died by suicide, reportedly after suffering years of anguish and depression over the circumstances of her mother's death, and consequences to her and her siblings. Sutcliffe committed his next murder in Leeds on 20 January 1976, when he stabbed 42-year-old Emily Jackson 52 times. In dire financial straits, Jackson had been persuaded by her husband to engage in prostitution, using the van of their family roofing business. Sutcliffe picked up Jackson, who was soliciting outside the Gaiety pub on Roundhay Road, then drove about half a mile to some derelict buildings on Enfield Terrace in the Manor Industrial Estate. Sutcliffe hit her on the head with a hammer, dragged her body into a rubbish-strewn yard, then used a sharpened screwdriver to stab her in the neck, chest and abdomen. He stamped on her thigh, leaving behind an impression of his boot. Sutcliffe attacked 20-year-old Marcella Claxton in Roundhay Park, Leeds, on 9 May. Walking home from a party, she accepted an offer of a lift from Sutcliffe. When she got out of the car to urinate, he hit her from behind with a hammer. Claxton survived and testified against Sutcliffe at his trial. At the time of this attack, Claxton had been 4 months pregnant and subsequently miscarried her baby. She required multiple, extensive brain operations and suffered from intermittent blackouts and chronic depression. On 5 February, Sutcliffe attacked Irene Richardson, a Chapeltown prostitute, in Roundhay Park. Richardson was bludgeoned to death with a hammer. Once she was dead, Sutcliffe mutilated her corpse with a knife. Tire tracks left near the murder scene resulted in a long list of possible suspect vehicles. 2 months later, on 23 April, Sutcliffe killed Patricia Atkinson, a prostitute from Bradford, in her flat, where police found a boot print on the bedclothes. 2 months after that, on 26 June, he murdered 16-year-old Jane MacDonald in Chapeltown. She was not a prostitute, and in the public perception, her murder showed that all women were potential victims. The police described her as the first innocent victim. Sutcliffe seriously assaulted Maureen Long in Bradford in July. He was interrupted and fled, leaving her for dead. She was suffering from hypothermia when found and was in hospital for 9 weeks. A witness misidentified the make of his car, resulting in more than 300 police officers checking thousands of cars without success. On 1 October 1977, Sutcliffe murdered Jean Jordan, a prostitute from Manchester. In a confession, Sutcliffe said he had realized the new £5 note he had given her was traceable. After hosting a family party at his new home, he returned to the wasteland behind Manchester's Southern Cemetery, where he had left the body, to retrieve the note. Unable to find it, he mutilated Jordan's corpse and moved it. On 9 October, Jordan's body was discovered by local dairy worker and future actor Bruce Jones, who had an allotment on land adjoining the site where the body was found and was searching for house bricks when he made the discovery. The £5 note, hidden in a secret compartment in Jordan's handbag, was traced to branches of the Midland Bank in Shipley and Bingley. Police analysis of bank operations allowed them to narrow their field of inquiry to 8,000 employees who could have received it in their wage packet. Over 3 months the police interviewed 5,000 men, including Sutcliffe. The police found that the alibi given for Sutcliffe's whereabouts was credible. He had indeed spent much of the evening of the killing at a family party. Weeks of intense investigations pertaining to the origins of the £5 note led to nothing, leaving police officers frustrated that they collected an important clue but had been unable to trace the actual firm, or employee within the firm, to which or whom the note had been issued. On 14 December, Sutcliffe attacked Marilyn Moore, another prostitute from Leeds. She survived and provided police with a description of her attacker. Tire tracks found at the scene matched those from an earlier attack. Her photofit bore a strong resemblance to Sutcliffe like other survivors, and she provided a good description of his car, which had been seen in red light districts. Sutcliffe had been interviewed on this issue. The police discontinued the search for the person who received the £5 note in January 1978. Although Sutcliffe was interviewed about it, he was not investigated further and he was contacted and disregarded by the Ripper squad on several further occasions. That month, Sutcliffe killed again. His victim was Yvonne Pearson, a 21-year-old prostitute from Bradford. He repeatedly bludgeoned her about the head with a ball-peen hammer, then jumped on her chest before stuffing horsehair into her mouth from a discarded sofa, under which he hid her body near Lum Lane. 10 days later, he killed Helen Riker, an 18-year-old prostitute from Huddersfield. He struck Riker on the head 5 times as she exited his vehicle, before stripping most of the clothes from her body, and repeatedly stabbing her in the chest. Her body was found 3 days later beneath railway arches in Garrett's timber yard to which he had driven her. Sutcliffe said of Riker while in police custody in 1981, "I had the urge to kill any woman. The urge inside me to kill girls was now practically uncontrollable." On the 16th of May, Sutcliffe killed Vera Millward in an attack in the car park of Manchester Royal Infirmary. On the 4th of April 1979, Sutcliffe killed Josephine Whittaker, a 19-year-old building society clerk whom he attacked on Savile Park Moor in Halifax as she was walking home. Despite forensic evidence, police efforts were diverted for several months following receipt of the taped message purporting to be from the murderer, taunting Assistant Chief Constable George Oldfield of the West Yorkshire Police, who was leading the investigation. The tape contained a man's voice saying, "I'm Jack. I see you're having no luck catching me. I have the greatest respect for you, George, but Lord, you're no nearer catching me now than 4 years ago when I started." Based on the recorded message, police began searching for a man with a Wearside accent, which linguists narrowed down to the Castletown area of Sunderland, Tyne and Wear. The hoaxer, dubbed Wearside Jack, sent 2 letters to police and the Daily Mirror in March 1978, boasting of his crimes. The letters, signed Jack the Ripper, claimed responsibility for the murder of 26-year-old Joan Harrison in Preston in November 1975. At the time, police mistakenly believed that the Preston murder was not public knowledge. The hoaxer case was reopened in 2005, and DNA taken from envelopes was entered into the national database, in which it matched that of John Samuel Humble, an unemployed alcoholic and longtime resident of the Ford estate in Sunderland, a few miles from Castletown, whose DNA had been taken following a drunken disorderly offense in 2001. On the 20th of October 2005, Humble was charged with attempting to pervert the course of justice for sending the hoax letters and tape. Humble was remanded in custody and on the 21st of March 2006 was convicted and sentenced to 8 years in prison. Humble died on the 30th of July 2019, aged 63. On the 1st of September, Sutcliffe murdered 20-year-old Barbara Leach, a Bradford University student. Her body was dumped at the rear of 13 Ashgrove under a pile of bricks, close to the university and her lodgings. It was his 16th attack. The murder of a woman who was not a prostitute again alarmed the public, and prompted an expensive publicity campaign emphasizing the Wearside connection. Despite the false lead, Sutcliffe was interviewed on at least 2 other occasions in 1979. Despite matching several forensic clues and being on the list of 300 names in connection with the £5 note, he was not strongly suspected. Sutcliffe was interviewed by police 9 times in total. In April 1980, Sutcliffe was arrested for drunk driving. While awaiting trial, he killed 2 more women. Sutcliffe murdered 47-year-old Marguerite Walls on the night of the 20th of August 1980, and 20-year-old Jacqueline Hill, a student at Leeds University, on the night of the 17th of November 1980. Hill's body was found on wasteland near the Arndale Centre. He also attacked 3 other women, who survived. First he attacked Apprehension Bandara in Leeds on the 24th of September 1980, then Maureen Lee, an art student, attacked in the grounds of Leeds University on the 25th of October. On the night of the 5th of November 1980, Sutcliffe attacked 16-year-old Teresa Sykes in Huddersfield. Having escaped and needing to feel safe, Sykes placed a wardrobe and dressing table against her bedroom door and slept with a knife hidden under her pillow. On the 25th of November 1980, Trevor Birdsall, an associate of Sutcliffe, and the getaway driver as Sutcliffe fled his first documented assault in 1969, reported him to the police as a suspect, but the information vanished into the paperwork already accumulated. On the 2nd of January 1981, Sutcliffe was stopped by the police with 24-year-old prostitute Olivia Reevers, in the driveway of Light Trades House in Melbourne Avenue, Broomhill, Sheffield. A police check by probationary constable Robert Hydes revealed Sutcliffe's car had false number plates and he was arrested and transferred to Dewsbury Police Station. At Dewsbury, he was questioned in relation to the Yorkshire Ripper case as he matched many of the known physical characteristics. The next day police returned to the scene of the arrest and discovered a knife, hammer, and rope he had discarded when he briefly slipped away from the police after telling them he was bursting for a pee. Sutcliffe hid a second knife in the toilet cistern at the police station when he was permitted to use the toilet. The police obtained a search warrant for his home in Heaton and brought his wife in for questioning. When Sutcliffe was stripped at the police station, he was wearing an inverted V-neck sweater under his trousers. The sleeves had been pulled over his legs and the V-neck exposed his genital area. The fronts of the elbows were padded to protect his knees as, presumably, he knelt over his victims' corpses. The sexual implications of this outfit were considered obvious, but it was not known to the public until published by Bilton in 2003. After 2 days of intensive questioning, on the afternoon of the 4th of January 1981, Sutcliffe suddenly declared he was the Ripper. Over the next day, he calmly described his many attacks. Weeks later he claimed God had told him to murder the women. The women I killed were filth, he told police. Bastard prostitutes who were littering the streets. I was just cleaning up the place a bit. Sutcliffe displayed regret only when talking of his youngest murder victim Jane MacDonald, and when questioned about the killing of Joan Harrison, he vehemently denied responsibility. Harrison's murder had been linked to the Ripper killings by the Wareside Jack claim, but in 2011, DNA evidence revealed the crime had actually been committed by convicted sex offender Christopher Smith, who had died in 2008. Sutcliffe was charged on the 5th of January 1981. At his trial, he pleaded not guilty to 13 charges of murder, but guilty to manslaughter on the grounds of diminished responsibility. The basis of his defense was that he claimed to be the tool of God's will. Sutcliffe said he had heard voices that ordered him to kill prostitutes while working as a gravedigger, which he claimed originated from the headstone of a Polish man called Bronislaw Zapolski, and that the voices were that of God. Sutcliffe pleaded guilty to 7 charges of attempted murder. The prosecution intended to accept Sutcliffe's plea after 4 psychiatrists diagnosed him with paranoid schizophrenia, but the trial judge Justice Sir Leslie Boreham demanded an unusually detailed explanation of the prosecution reasoning. After a 2-hour representation by the Attorney General Sir Michael Havers, a 90-minute lunch break, and another 40 minutes of legal discussion, the judge rejected the diminished responsibility plea and the expert testimonies of the psychiatrists, insisting that the case should be dealt with by a jury. The trial proper was set to commence on the 5th of May 1981. The trial lasted 2 weeks, and despite the efforts of his counsel James Chadwin, Sutcliffe was found guilty of murder on all counts and was sentenced to 20 concurrent sentences of life imprisonment. The jury rejected the evidence of 4 psychiatrists that Sutcliffe had paranoid schizophrenia, possibly influenced by the evidence of a prison officer, who heard him say to his wife that if he convinced people he was mad then he might get 10 years in a loony bin. The trial judge said Sutcliffe was beyond redemption, and hoped he would never leave prison. He recommended a minimum term of 30 years to be served before parole could be considered, meaning Sutcliffe would have been unlikely to be freed until at least 2011. On the 16th of July 2010, the High Court issued Sutcliffe with a whole life tariff, meaning he was never to be released. After his trial, Sutcliffe admitted 2 other attacks. It was decided that prosecution for these offences was not in the public interest. West Yorkshire Police made it clear that the victims wished to remain anonymous. Sutcliffe died at University Hospital of North Durham, aged 74 on the 13th of November 2020, after having previously returned to HMP Franklin following treatment for a suspected heart attack, at the same hospital 2 weeks prior. He had a number of underlying health problems, including diabetes, and had refused treatment for COVID-19. A private funeral ceremony was held, and Sutcliffe's body was cremated. Thanks for watching. For more videos please click like and subscribe.